starts. All these three wings of the government, namely the courts, legislature, and the executive, are there to serve the people, to champion the cause of the people, and to see that the welfare of the people is maintained. The welfare and security of the people of the land must be the price consideration of any government or court or legislature. If anything assumes greater jurisdiction in this link, it must be checked by suitable remedial measures undertaken to see that each wing functions in its own sphere without encroaching upon the jurisdiction of the other. The government have no doubt enormous powers to taxation and of arresting and prosecuting people. They must necessarily have checks on them, and the courts are exercising that check on the government. Therefore, it is in the interest of everybody that the dignity of the courts, the legislature, and the executive should be evenly mentioned. Otherwise, ultimately, there will be friction among these three limits of the government, and the welfare of the people will be jeopardized. Sir, one of the members raised the question whether we are having the state insurance scheme in our state and transport department. I may inform that we have built up an insurance fund of rupees 2 lakhs. Whenever in accidents occur, we draw from this fund and pay compensation to those involved in the accident and immediately reimburse. The amount paid as compensation from the general revenue or the state departmental revenue. Thus, we always keep up this fund to the extent of rupees 2 lakhs. At one time, we thought of building up a larger fund, but when we looked at the number of cases of accidents, we came to the conclusion that rupees 2 lakhs would suffice for this purpose for the permanent present. Reference was made to rural electrification. I am glad to hear the members who raised this subject say that he was speaking for the people. I really want that some members should specialize in certain select subjects and bring matters relating to those subjects to the notice of the government. If they do this, they are sure to attract the attention of that house and the government, as they can talk in an authoritative and convincing manner about the subjects specialized by them. With these few observations, I conclude my reply to the discussion on the appropriation bill once again, thanking and participants for their constructive suggestions. Speaking on the industrial disputes amendment bill in the Rajya Sabha, the leader of the opposition said, "Mr. Deputy Chairman, this is an important bill and I welcome it heartily. It has always been the unanimous demand of the working class that there should be prevention of closures, lockouts and layoffs. This is an overdue measure. The Industrial Disputes Act is a very old piece of legislation and it requires a lot of changes. The proposed amendment will bring a great deal of relief to the working class." Sir, I would now like to make a few observations on the Industrial Disputes Amendment Bill. In this bill, a provision has been made whereby it will apply only to an establishment which employs 300 workmen. There is no rational basis for fixing this number of 300. It was the recommendation of the Indian Labour Conference that an establishment to which the provisions of the Industrial Disputes Act would apply should employ at least 50 persons subsequently. The Act was amended accordingly, and 50 persons was the criterion for application of the provisions of the Industrial Disputes Act to an establishment. Now we have passed the bonus bill and reduced the qualifying number of employees in an establishment from 20 to 30. But in this way, very important bill which will be basis for rapid industrial production and industrial peace, we are stating that the number of employees in an establishment should be 300. I don't find any reasonable basis for arriving at this figure of 300. I would like the Honorable Minister to explain how this figure has been fixed in this legislation. I suggest that in order to have uniformity, this provision about employment of 300 persons should be amended and it should be made 50. There are provisions in this bill according to which it is necessary to ask for permission prior to lay-off or retrenchment or closure, but it is provided that no such notice is necessary if the retrenchment is under an agreement which specifies a date for termination of service. I think the old provision also require modification. In view of the policy of the government not to allow lay-off or closure, it is necessary that such an agreement also should not be allowed to be made without the prior permission of the government. Such an agreement puts to an end the whole scheme and therefore it should not be permitted. Looking to the interest of the community as a whole, such an agreement should not be allowed to be made. This provision is likely to be misused and therefore it requires vigilance on the part of the government. With regard to restarting of an undertaking which had already been closed down, the provision is that of restarting an undertaking which was already closed down, otherwise than on account of unavoidable circumstances beyond the control of the employers and so on. The government can always come forward with a plea that the closure of an industry or an undertaking was due to unavoidable circumstances beyond the control of the employer. In a capitalist society in which we are living today, with increasing concentration and monopolies, we find that many industries are closed down due to various obstacles, various deficiencies of the market, various defects in the production and distribution system. An employer can always argue that he had to close down the undertaking for reasons beyond his control. No employer has absolute control or even partial control over the market, which is the product of the working of the entire economic system. Therefore, it is easy for an employer to get away under the law on the plea of unavoidable circumstances. Such being the case, the provision should be so modified as to make it apply to all undertakings which have been closed down for any reason. My next point is in the case of industrial disputes, how to settle them. If disputes are settled at the proper time, all worries will be automatically solved and a situation of layoff or retrenchment will not arise. For this, I would suggest that joint management councils should be established in each industry and they should be given the responsibility of settling the industrial disputes arising in their respective industries. The aggrieved workers or the aggrieved upon can bring forward their complaint to the Joint Management Council and the Joint Management Council can settle it. I think with their efforts, at least 50% of the disputes will be solved in the very industry itself. If there is something left, then the appropriate government should keep a panel of top-level mediators, not mediators of the ordinary caliber, but top-level mediators. 3 or 4, but not more than that, to whom the disputes can be referred. This way, I think the disputes will come to a great extent. These mediators should try to settle the disputes by moving both the employer and the employees. If any dispute is still left, it should go for arbitration. If something more is left, then it should go to the court. The present difficulty is that workers don't get justice done to them speedily. Therefore, this way of doing things will bring about some relief to the workers. If you adopt this method, at least 80% of the cases will be disposed of in this manner and only 10% of the cases will be left. For that, either at the state level or at the level of the appropriate authority, there can be a tribunal where workers should be there. 1 or 2 judges should be there, and employers also should be represented there. That tribunal may dispose of finally all the cases arising out of disputes, and there will not then be the need to accept the suggestion of the honorable member, namely bringing forward another piece of legislation plugging all the loopholes. Mr. Chairman, sir, I have listened very carefully to the comments made by the honorable members of the Finance Bill, as well as other aspects of the budget. In my reply, I shall try to cover the more important points made by the honorable member. They have made useful suggestions and also raised valuable suggestions of policy. As I said earlier in this session, this first budget of ours had to be prepared at a time when allocations proposed for different ministries had been made and they had started working on that basis. Therefore, the scope for giving a new direction was limited if there was to be no wastage of scarce resources. Nevertheless, sufficient changes were made to make clear the direction in which we intended to move and would move in the coming years. The valuable suggestions made by the honorable members will certainly be useful in framing our next budget. And I may say within a matter of weeks we shall be working on it. As I said in my budget speech, our intention is to give primary importance to agriculture because we feel that is the only way in which we can solve the problems of poverty and unemployment.